I'm not interested.
All right, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Passengers? Stick around and find out. It's me and you and me, and something between me. So happy together. I don't really know songs. I don't really know. I only know weird, weird songs that no one else knows. But you know the lyrics to that song, and it totally, it goes with the theme of this movie, which is Passengers. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Here's my uncut review of Passengers, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. The synopsis reads, a spacecraft traveling to a distant colony planet and transporting thousands of people has a malfunction in its sleep chambers. As a result, 2 passengers are awakened 90 years early. All right, so let me just talk about the story, the script, and just kind of how the pacing is in general. If you watch this movie, you're in for a sci-fi drama romance suspense flick, which is an amazing balance of all those things mixed together. Neither one really kind of dominates the movie. So, I mean, for example, if you're not really into romance, this thing also functions for much of it as a sci-fi drama, or in the latter half, a sci-fi suspense movie. On the other hand, if you're really just kind of into romance, maybe not into sci-fi, I think if you're into just 2 of those categories, sci-fi, romance, drama, suspense, if you're just into 2 of those, then I think there's enough in this movie that will keep you engaged. At least it did for me. I happen to like all of those, and it was, as a nerd, especially awesome to have sci-fi in the mix. The tension hangs on a secret that Jim is keeping from Aurora. These are the 2 main characters for much of the movie, and then further tension is later added when the couple has to deal with dangerous malfunctions across the systems of the ship. The movie opens as kind of like a straight drama with no romance at the beginning, just kind of like this isolated kind of character portrait in a sense, and then it moves into romance and builds in crescendos as a suspense movie, and yet each new type of genre that's introduced only adds a layer, I think, rather than negating or replacing the genre before. So it's like, when the romance is introduced, it's not that it's not a drama anymore. It's still very much a character drama, and so on and so forth as each of those, kind of layers is added. And by the last 30 minutes, it's a drama with romance and suspense, all in this great sci-fi space setting that I really enjoyed. I would love more movies to kind of mash up genres like this one, especially combining sci-fi or fantasy especially, because we've got some sci-fi doing this already, mixing sci-fi or fantasy with drama and or romance. We've got a few of those. We've got like A Time Traveler's Wife, About Time, which actually have the same leading lady in both of those, strangely enough, and a few others. We got The Frequency would be an example of a sci-fi drama. I would love to see some kind of, I don't know what it would be, like an elf romance or something like that. I don't know how you pull that off and really make it work, and taken seriously by people that maybe aren't fans of fantasy. But anyway, I'd love to see more of these kinds of mashups. This movie was really moving to me in several places, but also interesting from a sci-fi perspective, and I think it also functions well as a drama that explores our need for relationships and purpose in life. So yeah, I got to tell you, I was really satisfied with my experience watching this movie. I really enjoyed both Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence in this movie. I've seen Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy, but I didn't really like that movie all that much. I didn't find it all that funny, and so it was neat to see him in a different role, but still in a sci-fi setting. That was cool. And Jennifer Lawrence, I've mostly just known her as Mystique, but I've seen 1 or 2 of the dramas she's been in. Both of them really engaged me and made me feel for the loss of their characters as their experience, their characters are experiencing. As they both face this prospect of, a potentially isolated life in the loneliness of space. Michael Sheen is also charming as the android bartender that serves as the closest thing to a human companion that the 2 lead characters have. He adds, just a little bit of comic relief, but there's, it's not like not enough to add comedy to that stack of, genres and settings. but yeah, it's just a nice little bit of relief to some of the relationship tension, or yeah, and just kind of like a reason to smile every now and then as you watch this movie. Most of the CGI, as we move on to stunts and visuals and stuff, stunts I won't really talk about. I would say that there were stunts, but I think I wasn't taken out of the movie. That's a really good thing. That's a sign in my book of really good stunts and visuals, is that they don't take me out of the movie. They just continue to propel me inward closer to the drama and build the suspense. And most of the CGI in this movie involved recreating machines and artificial life, like, robots or big props or whatever, which means that my cursed CGI detecting eyes were pretty happy and never really taken out of the story because of the effects. There wasn't much life to potentially recreate with this, with CGI in this kind of story. But I'll say again that I think current CGI works best when avoiding the recreation of living things and just sticking to recreating machines and immobile objects. In any other case, just to get on my soapbox for a second, I would much prefer to see animatronics or puppets, or CGI enhanced animatronics and puppets. But don't make the whole thing out of CGI, because my freaking eyes are cursed and it just totally feels like I'm watching cartoons when that happens. All right, so is there anything, I always like to ask myself, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance that might bring about worthwhile thought or conversation as a result of watching this movie? And I think so. I'll go from kind of like the least noticeable to me to the most noticeable, starting with the plot and how it demonstrates how both selfish choices and natural evils can be used as a catalyst for something good, and every bit worth the resulting suffering that's involved, that comes out of those selfish choices or those natural evils. One of the big questions that can be a stumbling block, or at least is presented as the stumbling block for many people's faith, is, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why does God let so much evil and destruction run rampant, seemingly, and how could God justify all of these, evils and horrible things that happen in the world, and I think through both the story of Joseph and his brothers selling him into slavery, and then in the cross itself, God demonstrates in actual history how these horrible evils can be used as a catalyst by God to bring about something that is much better and much greater and totally worth it. So I think that there is some in how the plot is constructed. There's you could come up with some examples here, even though it's fiction, of how that kind of thing could potentially happen. The premise and story also, I think, work well as a metaphor for biblical marriage. The Bible treats marriage as an exclusive relationship of love that is meant to last until death, despite intense difficulties or conflict. The divorce rate among Christians in America, last time I checked, which has been a little while, is the same as that of non-Christians, which probably says something about how we as Christians typically view our Bibles in relationship to our everyday lives, which is to say that we don't see the Bible as being very relevant to our everyday lives, unfortunately. And at the very least, unless most Christian divorces are due to infidelity, I think it's an indicator that many Christians see marriage as something that can be just kind of given up on when major conflicts arise in the relationship. But although the two passengers in this movie aren't married, they are in this situation where they recognize that, no, there are no other relationship options. This is it. We are in this, and this is all there. There are no other options, and that reality forces them to work through their problems, which results in a beautiful model of genuine biblical love that I found moving. Standing out even more than those two themes, though, and certainly I think intended by the filmmakers, is the theme of purpose. A repeated quote and slogan of the movie goes something like, don't be so intent on where you want to be that you miss out on making the most of where you actually are. My wife and I, on the way to the theater, knowing nothing about this movie really, we're discussing, our personal difficulties with desiring significance or wanting to feel like we're fulfilling our purpose through our day-to-day lives and routines. And, we both feel that natural desire to one day look back on our lives and feel like we accomplished something, and we still feel that pull, even knowing the truth that it isn't our accomplishments that make us significant. It's the fact that God is, made us in some way to be reflections of Him, and then fixated on us to the point of becoming, adding humanity to Himself, and then dying so that we could be reconciled to Him forever. That's what makes us immensely valuable, immensely significant, and also accomplishing what other people may or may not find impressive doesn't really bring fulfillment. So those are the kinds of things that my wife and I were thinking about as we came into this movie. The reality is that fulfilling our purpose is as simple as Micah 6:8, even though it's simply stated, but there's a lot more involved in actually applying it to our lives. But Micah 6:8 says, He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does Yahweh require of you but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And we can live that way even through simple lives that no one even notices. And that's very similar to the message of this film. I don't want to say too much about the message of the film because it might potentially give away kind of where things go in the story, but I think there's a similar message, and the idea that, I'll give that quote again that seems to be a focal point of the movie. Don't be so intent on where you want to be, what you want to accomplish, what you want to achieve, that you miss out on making the most and appreciating the beauty of the situation that you're in, and the good that can be found there. So I have no idea what your tastes in movies are, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, hey, Peter, okay, first off, you're curious about the nudity thing and how's that going to play out. The nudity in the PG-13 rating info basically amounts to 2 brief shots of Chris Pratt's butt, although Jennifer Lawrence likes to wear a tiny swimsuit and a few other skimpy outfits that are shown very briefly. The sexual scenes are brief and either obscured or shadowed. You should be okay with this one. Just watch in your peripheral vision during the swimming or the sexy stuff. This is a great movie that both you and your wife are really going to enjoy, Peter. You're going to be moved by it. You're going to share a meaningful personal discussion over this movie on the drive home. It's going to be a great date for both of you guys. It's rated PG-13 for sexuality, nudity, as I described, and action/peril. All right, well, those are my thoughts. I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments below. Visit spiritblade.com to see what we have for you there. That's a great way you can support the content of this channel and Christian Geek Central, which I hope you'll join us at soon. At christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.